Once again, time to talk fishing here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman, our weekly wildlife conversation with Chris Dunnavant for the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. And we want to continue a conversation that we started last week, and that's about the Alabama rig. Now, this has become somewhat of a controversial subject in the fishing world, especially in the tournament world. And it really started back in October of 2011 when Paul Elias won an FLW Tour Open down in Alabama using the Alabama rig. Now, since that time, the BASS tournament has banned it in its Elite and Bassmaster series, and that has certainly stirred quite a debate in the fishing community. So to help kind of sort through some of this, because there are a lot of issues at work right here, welcome back in for the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, Chris Dunnavant. And, Chris, I think it's right off the top, there's a lot of different feelings in regards to this subject. So I think it's important, first and foremost, just to kind of lay the groundwork and really see where different parties are coming from on this subject. First and foremost, the Alabama rig, obviously unique in the sense that you've got essentially 5 different opportunities to catch a fish. Right. And I think first and foremost, what some anglers are arguing is that too easy?
Yeah, that is the big question, and really, it's a lot what has happened. You mentioned Paul Elias winning that tournament. The big thing that's made this lure rig such a huge controversy is because of the way it's come on the scene. I think I said last week, I've never seen a new wave, a new bait have this much buzz and impact and talk in my lifetime. But the reason is just because before that tournament at Guntersville that Paul Elias won, all the predictions for that tournament were really bad. It's a fall event. That's typically can be a tough time. The fish are scattered. They're out chasing shad that are schooling, and they're suspended. There's fluctuating nighttime and daytime temperatures, and it gets the fish kind of in a mood of just they're not really biting very well. And so all predictions were that this was going to be probably an all-time low weight for Guntersville, which is a bass factory. But little did anybody know that the Alabama rig was rigged up on many of these pros' rods going into day one of that tournament. And I remember reading the day before the event about this poor, predictions, just everything's going to be terrible. And then you look at the standings of day one, and these monster bags, 26 pounds, coming in 25, 20 pounds. You're like, what happened? And it was all because of the Alabama rig. And it turned out, at the end of the tournament, all top 10 guys in that tournament out of 200 anglers starting off were throwing the Alabama rig. So that really thrust this on the scene like we've never seen. And then subsequently, the next tournaments after that were won with it. But the big controversy is that fair to have... essentially, it's not a lure. It's a harness to hold 5 lures. Well, like you said, you've got 5 opportunities to catch a fish. Is that fair? Should it be legal or even in tournaments legal to fish with 5 baits at one time? Well, where does that end? I think what I've heard, there are already folks who are making them with 10 rigs. So, or should it just be sportsmanlike, one rig, one hook, one bait at a time? And that's the big controversy.
Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation, and delving into the Alabama rig debate this week. And Chris, I want to kind of get into where some people fall on both sides. The people that are in support of the BASS banning this rig, some of the things that we've both read were the fact that they feel like simply the skill is taken out of it, that they feel like it's just a matter of throwing it out there, reeling it in, and then you have your fish. Talk a little bit about that mentality, because that's something that we talked about a little bit with the John Cruz and the David Dudley, their competitive mentality and their view of fishing as an art form and a craft. And this is something that is somewhat emotional to some anglers, that they really feel like there has to be a skill set. And I know the one comparison that has been made many times is why they don't have aluminum bats in Major League Baseball, right? Because it's just so easy to hit home runs.
Right. And that is one of the points, is that an angler that doesn't necessarily have the skill level that these pros have could go out and just chunk and wind this Alabama rig all day long and come in with a big bag of fish without a lot of the skill and all the work that leads up to that. And I think that could be true at some times. History has taught me, and just fishing has taught me, there is no magic lure, and there may be days where that is possible, but I doubt that that's just a standard, everyday thing. And but that is one of the concerns, and as you said, there may be some emotion involved. I think I listened to an interview with Rick Clunn, and he brought about that this may be an emotional decision right now because we really haven't had a chance for a good season of fishing, a good season of tournament fishing. And as he pointed out, the major tournament trails, the elite tournament trails, are the best testing ground for lures and baits. I mean, those guys are fishing for a living. They are going to push these things to the max, and they're only going to use stuff. They're fishing for a living. They're trying to compete and win events. And guarantee you, I watch what they throw because they're only going to throw the best stuff. And so if they're throwing something or they're rigging something a certain way, I'm going to really pay attention. But so we've missed, because of maybe, according to Rick, an emotional decision to ban it without giving it a good testing year. We might miss a little bit of what we can see it do. Although, fortunately, we will have the FLW Tour. They have not banned it, and I don't foresee them doing that at this point. So we'll have that pro tournament trail to see what the Alabama rig is going to do this year.
And it makes sense from the FLW's perspective not to ban it, because if the BASS tournament have it banned, then, well, boy, that opens up a lot of opportunities for marketing, people paying attention to your trail, because all of a sudden this is legal. People are going to want to see what that leads to. But before we get into some of the other things that you just brought up, I wanted to touch upon one other thing that some of the guys were saying in terms of support of the BASS banning. And this is something that we talked about off the air as well. Removing the gray area, making it simple. Right. One rod, one reel, one bait.
Right.
One hook. Just simple. There is no room for misinterpretation in that regard, and that way it seemingly evens the playing field and all of a sudden enters more skill than anything else, at least for those anglers' perspective.
Right. That is definitely one of, and when you look at this debate, if you're really neutral, you see the benefits of both sides of the argument. But I really do see that you have different regulations in different states. Some states you can only have 2 lures or 3. Others it's banned altogether. And these tours travel all over the country. So maybe it is simplification for the rules' sake, but also, just it does remove that gray area so that it's just very clear. And I think those elite guys, from what I heard, I listened to an interview with Kevin Van Dam and what he said, and of course talking to Cruz, that, they, I think, really wanted things just to be cut and dried. Here's what the stakes are going to be in the Elite Series. It's going to be about catching fish and fooling those fish with one lure, and that's it. We're not, and because before this, even double lure rigs were allowed. People would fish certain rigs with 2 baits on them, a double top water, a double fluke rig, a drop shot rig with 2 baits, and that was no problem. But now that's all gone. You've got to fish with just one lure, and I think that really just makes it simple for them. And again, there's pluses and minuses to that. But it sounds like there are detractors in the Elite Series, but it sounds like the majority of the anglers, that's what they wanted. And really, how can you argue with that if that's really the way they want their trail to look and to behave and to act?
Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman, talking about the Alabama rig controversy. And Chris, there was one point certainly that goes kind of with those that are against this being banned, and something that you and I have talked about as well, and that's the evolution of the fishing industry. Mm-hmm. And you kind of touched upon already how this Elite Series is really the best testing ground because these are the best of the best. You've got the coverage of these events where things are known. There's more information that's out there because of the way these events are covered. How big of a deal is it that perhaps this particular rig will not get some of that additional coverage, exposure, and testing?
Right, I agree. That's one of the parts that I really was kind of down about when they banned it on the Elites, is because of the two major trails. I do believe the Elite Series has the best television coverage. They really are in the boat. I mean, it just seems like they're in the boat more. They are right there with the anglers. They are focused on what the anglers are doing in fishing. I think it's the best. It's produced by ESPN and JM Associates. They're just top-notch, and it's the best coverage. So in that sense, it is a loss. We will have the FLW side. They do have a good television show. But, we do miss out on that innovative side, and it would be nice to see the creative ways and the things that these top anglers, what they would do with the rig. That they were already thinking about, okay, what can we do? How can we fish it differently? I mean, right now the standard deal is put 5 swim baits or 5 grubs on it, chunk it and wind it, but these pros are already devising different ways to fish it, different rigs, different lures, top to bottom, and it would be really interesting to see what would come out of that. And who knows where that would go. We're always trying to learn and catch, do better, catching fish, catching more fish, catching bigger fish, and it is kind of tough to see when an opportunity comes to enhance that, to further that, and then it's stifled. So that is one of the negatives.
And Chris, one last thing on this subject too, and this is another topic or another reason that people who are against the BAS banning this particular rig, they say that it hasn't had the full year to test it. I mean, they've only done fall and winter. No one knows what's happening during the spawning seasons yet, and they just don't feel like there's enough information that has been gathered to say, well, this is something that's either good or bad or, just another bait.
Right, and I think what happens with that is you've got then, it may be accurate to say that it's been an emotional response, because it would be nice to see, hey, what happens in a full season? We've only seen this in a short window of time. And then it, of course, brings people to speculate, well, is it sponsor-driven? Is that part of it? Is it because they just want to simplify the rules and so that they don't have to worry about the different regulations at states? And whatever it may be, is it driven by certain pros because they still want to promote their crankbait brand, and they don't want to see Alabama rig winning everything and their crankbaits can't win? And that just causes people to speculate. So it is one of the things. It would have been nice to see a season with it, and then because really, if the Alabama rig is as dominant as what maybe is thought or feared, however you want to phrase it, if it wins every tournament throughout the tournament trail, every single one, at the top 5, Alabama rig, that's not good for the industry either. That's like, well, why buy other baits? I don't foresee that happening. Been around, I've never seen a bait do that. It probably won't be this one, but I think that's one of the concerns. But we definitely wouldn't want to see that. I mean, definitely the variety in fishing is what keeps it going around and keeps it moving forward. But I think it'd have been nice to see a year of these pros with this bait in their hand to see what they would do with it. But, we'll just have to watch the FLW Tour. And you were right. Guaranteed this season I'm going to be, really scampering to get online to see the results of that FLW tournament trail every evening because I want to see, are they throwing that Alabama rig? How's it working over there? So, it's a good move on FLW not to ban it.
Chris, I appreciate you taking part in the conversation. As you said, we'll just have to see where this thing goes, and it'll definitely be something that we follow throughout the course of the summer. And Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. Stay tuned. Got my game plan for the weekend. First weekend without NFL football. Tell you what to do around Richmond when we come back.
The show is almost over, but the weekend is just getting started. More of The Weekend with Anthony Opperman is next on Sports Radio 910.